Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Bill Howard. I'm the CEO of the International Compliance Association. Welcome to you all. It's nice to see so many of you. Please bear in mind with you that also live stream, so there may be questions that ultimately come in from people outside at the same point in time. The purpose of today really is twofold. One, for people who are interested in compliance, it's about how you access and come into the profession and what the best and alternative routes are for you. And also if you're already within the compliance field, and when I say compliance, I include anti-money laundering and financial crime and CDD and all those areas. The purpose is, how do you progress your career? How do you move on? So that's essentially what the purpose of the day is. The way we've structured the session is that after I've done the initial introduction, I'll be introducing my colleague Becca Dare, who's the Global Head of Training, who'll be talking to you about the anti-money laundering field. What then happens is that we've got a representative here, Chad Lawson from Robert Walters, who are a recruitment firm, and they'll give you a lot of information about the whole area around compliance and how you access different types of jobs within that area. We then move on to giving you some specific introductions around the field of what we call regulatory compliance, and Viri Chowan and Jonathan Bodler, who are members of the ICA full-time academic staff, will introduce that area as well. After the break, we will then, Becca again will talk to you then about financial crime, and then there'll be, in fact, we've got representatives or students who've done the course from Ernst & Young to just give you 5 minutes about the experience on one of the courses. And then we'll finish off with some questions. So that's the object of the exercise for the whole of the day. Now, starting off then, I think the very first thing I want to emphasize here is that compliance is a very hot profession at this point in time. I think most people are probably aware of that. Number of quotes from the press that you can see in front of you there. There's no question about it. The whole face of compliance and anti-money laundering has changed dramatically in recent years. It used to be an era, didn't it, where compliance was regarded as tick box and a fairly dull profession. That has changed dramatically. It's now a very dynamic field of work. Compliance has been elevated in terms of its status within firms. It's often part of the overall strategy of a firm in terms of the overall corporate direction of a firm is often governed to a degree by compliance. Compliance people are empowered and often independent, and the status of the profession has changed. My mandate over the last 10 years has been the professionalisation of compliance, and that has really happened dramatically, certainly in the last 5 years. So where we're coming from here is it's a hot profession. There are a significant number of jobs in this field, salaries are high, poaching takes place, and therefore, in fact, it's a profession that is in great demand. So I think that's the first message I want to get across to you here. Now, you can see from there, one of the people say to me, is this going to continue? Well, the reality is, if you look at the statistics, and these on here, these are in billions of US dollars. What you can see here is, and we're probably halfway along that run there, but what they're anticipating is that by 2018, this industry of products and services in the field of compliance will be worth in excess of $10 billion. It's a rapidly growing field. And the answer is, well, you may say, well, why is that? Why is this area growing so dramatically? And as you can see there, I think when Ernst & Young themselves did a survey of firms in the financial services industry, what came across is that the number one business risk to these firms was the whole area of risk, regulation, and compliance. It's the number one business risk. Consequently, the firms themselves are having to put large amounts of resource into the area. Many of you will have seen the large numbers of regulatory fines, both from here and the United States, that is putting additional pressure on the firms. And they're having to change the remedial programs that are being put in place by the large organisations in particular are astronomical in terms of size. So there's regulatory enforcement and pressure on the firms. It's a big business risk. Hence, the individual organisations are having to put more resource and require more people in order to achieve where they want to go with this. A couple of other points there is, one of the problems in this area, and it's probably good from many of your perspectives, is that compliance isn't a discipline that you would normally go to university and study. So what you found when all of this has exploded in the last, 5-7 years, people then say, well, where do we get the experienced people from? They didn't exist. Now, it's changing and gradually growing, but there's a real shortage of talent in terms of this area, particularly at the middle to high level. That's why salaries are so high, that's why poaching takes place. And one of the issues that we're trying to do is trying to resolve this particular problem. We often will get calls from different regulators around the world. Can you provide us with, or train us, not only hundreds, but sometimes thousands of people that they require to be trained to go into this particular area. So I think the point that I'm making here, it's a very hot discipline. There's no question about that. It's one which is very dynamic. It's becoming very popular and people are wanting to access it. Now, what we're going to be talking about today and the teams that are going to be able to advise you are all outside, or will do in the breaks. You'll find there representatives from the ICA, Jo Lewis and her team from the ICA, Helen Langton, who's the MD of ICT, the main training organisation, is here with her team of people. You've got all the academics here who do the training on the programme. They're all available to take your queries and questions. Many people often at this session come in and say, I don't know whether to do regulatory compliance or AML, which shall I do? Well, hopefully at the end of today, you'll have that information. You'll have that knowledge and information to know what you want to do. And at what level? One of the things we're talking about is, well, what level shall I come in? Shall I start with the introductory programme? Shall I, in fact, come in at an intermediate level? Or if I'm experienced, should I come in at the expert or the advanced level? And those are some of the questions that we're going to be facing today. Now, you've got a bag of goodies there. The most important one, from my point of view, is to understand how it all works, is that one there with the diagram of qualifications. And so you can see things in context. So when Becca and Jonathan and Viri are talking to you about qualifications, you can see where they fit in that overall picture. I think that's the important point. Delighted that also today, as I say, we've got with us some past students. We've got Alex, Stephen and Tarek from Ernst & Young, and they'll tell you about their experience on taking a course at the ICA. And one of the things I want to say about that is, it isn't compulsory, not in this country anyway, to have a qualification or indeed an ICA qualification. But it's certainly highly recommended, and that may well change. Any of you who are aware of the new senior persons regime at the FCA and that's coming in, where there is a requirement that firms are having to demonstrate that their senior people are competent, and also there's going to be annual certification, it's becoming much more important, and hence the real push for qualifications and education and demonstrations of competency in this area. Okay, now ICA, it's been around a long time now, 2002 since I was one of the original founders of the organisation. We've worked since then in tandem with the University of Manchester Business School, who are our quality assurance partners on the programme, and also in conjunction with the British Bankers Association. They have been with us right from the very beginning and are one of the co-sponsors and awarders of the qualifications that the ICA offers. A couple of things also about us there. We are genuinely global. Our head office, of course, is here in London, in the United Kingdom here. We have, in fact, offices around the country here in the UK. But we have big regional offices in places like Singapore and Dubai and Moscow these days. And that's growing. We've got probably more than 100,000 people have taken ICA qualifications over the last decade. We probably do face-to-face in about 30 countries around the world. And we have students in more than 100 countries. So it's a genuinely global body. Now, the beauty of the qualifications that you will take here in the United Kingdom, they're UK focused, of course, but they have to have an international flavour. This business is international, there's no question about that. So you need that international element or component of your training programmes. So I say we've been around a long time. We really do encourage that the best way of learning is face-to-face. I know you can do courses by distance learning and e-learning, but we genuinely believe that the best experience that you can have will be through, in fact, having your courses on a face-to-face basis. You've got all the information in your packs about the timetables, the commencement dates, application form, they're directing you online. It's a very simplified application system now if you want to do a qualification in those areas. And so you should have, by the time you go away today, you should have all the information you need in terms of attempting to progress within the profession that you're choosing here. Okay, just moving on there, the ICA qualifications, there are over 50 to choose from a whole range of areas. Now, they tend to fall into those 4 major disciplines that you've got there, of anti-money laundering, regulatory compliance, customer due diligence, and financial crime. And within those, there are different levels. So you can do certificate, advanced certificate, diplomas, postgraduate diplomas, which then form part of a master's degree. So we built the whole educational framework for you in terms of you have to choose which area and at what level. Those are the key decisions for you, I think, in terms of if you want to move into this as a new area for a career. Already indicated then that everything we do is certificated. Every single certification that comes out of this organisation is co-badged with the University of Manchester on it. And that links you then to the levels. So, for example, our diplomas carry with it 120 credits at higher education 3 level. What that means, it's equivalent to a year of an undergraduate degree. Many people do more than one of those qualifications, and there are then possibilities of utilising that and then building that up into degrees or master's programmes if that's what you want to do. Okay, our partners, the University of Manchester, very reputable organisation, as many of you will know. It's a Russell Group university, one of the oldest, probably it's the largest university in the United Kingdom, and we've been also working with them since 2002. As I say, they're our quality assurance educational partner on everything that we do. Just a bit of information there about them. That's the global map of our students around the world. As you can see, we've got lots of students everywhere. The beauty for you is that if you get moved overseas, you can finish your qualifications in those jurisdictions if you started here. You know, if you go on holiday to Bahamas, Cayman Islands, somewhere like that, you can pop in and do one of your workshops there if you want to do that while you're there. So there's that interchangeability and possibility of doing things of that nature. Okay, now the training is conducted by ICT. They're the accredited training provider here in the United Kingdom. As I say, there's a big representation of Helen Langton and her team today to talk to you about the different courses that you might want to do. We have other accredited partners in other parts of the world, but they're the one that do the UK courses in particular. And there's a little bit of information there about them. Okay, now, although I was going to say any questions now, what we'll do is I'll come back at the end when you've had all the sessions and we'll have some open questions then. And then within each of the other sessions, you will be able to answer questions. And also, for the people who are coming in through the live streaming, we'll take some of their questions as well. So that's just all I want to say by way of introduction. So what I'm now going to do is hand over to my colleague, Becca Dare, who, as I say, is the global head of training, and he's going to start off by talking to you about anti-money laundering.
Thanks, Bill. Cheers, thank you. Right, good morning, everyone. Welcome along. It's great to see so many people here today. As Bill said, my name is Becca. I'm the director of the ICT academic faculty, and this fine body of individuals is mostly sat here, but we do have one or two scattered around. So in terms of today's session, what I'm going to do is give you a bit of an overview of the AML discipline and maybe some of the hot topics and some key aspects of the program, which I think is, genuinely fascinating subject. And we'll talk about what some of the emerging trends are, where the program focuses, and talk a little bit as well about, what the benefits are of undertaking the program. Okay. So in terms of, I'm just waiting for the slides to pop up here. I'm in control. Right, that would help. I'm sort of looking blankly at the back there, but it's my fault. I do apologise. Okay, so yes. So let's look at this. In terms of the program, we focus on the AML discipline, focuses, I guess, on anti-money laundering, but also wider aspects such as sanctions, which is, an incredibly challenging area. We're going to just touch a little bit on sanctions risk. I know many of you here will be, managing sanctions issues intrinsically linked to geopolitical events that are changing on a daily basis. And, you would think it's very grey, wouldn't you? Someone is on a sanctions list, therefore we can't do business with them. But actually, sanctions is all about professional judgments and making calls in grey areas and managing risk. So we'll touch on that. We'll also, of course, talk about terrorist financing as well, which is, again, I guess, almost intrinsically linked with anti-money laundering. And we'll look at the challenges that organisations are facing at the moment in all of those areas. So, of course, the term anti-money laundering has been with us a long time, and there is actually a lot of academic debate about where it originated from. And, this is called, I thought, believes it is Al Capone, who did famously push a lot of money through laundrettes. And, of course, the reason they got Capone was tax, wasn't it, as I think most people know. Now, my background is I've worked as a money laundering reporting officer and head of financial crime in various regulated firms, but originally I started out in tax. And we do look again at the nexus between tax and crime. Tax is actually a very effective way of going after organised criminals. And they hate it, by the way. But you can raise tax assessments against drug dealers, people traffickers, and increasingly it's been used as a weapon. So what I think, when we go into the program, we actually look at some of the latest intelligence, some of the latest reality about how organised criminals are moving their wealth around the world. And I think, for many people that I work with, they've really had the chance to step back and look at why we're doing this. Who are our enemy out there? What techniques are they actually using? What techniques do corrupt politicians use to suck money out of developing economies? Where does that money go? How does an organised crime group actually seek to legitimise its wealth? And, I've seen this in practice. It's huge and it's everywhere. A lot of it is in the City of London, as you probably know. We'll be looking on the course at some of the latest thinking about the techniques used. So many of you will have read about the case from a few years ago, which the press dubbed the Great British Laundrette. Dozens and dozens of front companies being set up in the UK, sham litigation, millions and millions of pounds washing through the City of London, but not just London, Manchester, Birmingham, a lot of it Russian organised crime. Corrupt politicians coming through Russia, links to Moldova. On the course, we're going to look at some of the techniques. You've probably all heard the phrase front company. Most of you would be aware of terms like ultimate beneficial owner. Now, the problem is, many banks, many financial institutions, they think they're dealing with one customer, but who's really behind that customer? And that is a hell of a challenge for all of us, because we know corrupt politicians and organised crime, they use corporate structures to hide behind. They use nominee directors and nominee shareholders. And we know that the law and regulatory expectation has dramatically changed in this area. So the million-dollar question is, in a regulated firm, how far do we have to go to know who our customers really are? How do we find the shadowy individual who's really controlling a corporate entity or has the wealth behind that entity? It's a very challenging area, very interesting. The other area we look at quite a bit is the rise of terrorist activity around the world, and particularly terrorist financing. And we work a lot with law enforcement agencies on the program. We have a lot of in-house experts on this field. And obviously, the rise of ISIS has changed the dynamic fundamentally. We know that historically, traditional routes of fundraising in terms of, donations, non-governmental organisations, not-for-profit bodies, it is changing as ISIS raises the bulk of its money from territories which it controls, in terms of tithes and levies on the local populace, oil, art and antiquities, and just actually looting bank accounts. We do know some money gets to them via donations and via fundraising, but that is actually a very small percentage. So the international community is wrestling at the moment with how do we tackle this? And what role do financial services firms have to play in this area? I work with a lot of banks who are looking at their transaction monitoring systems to say, how do we profile terrorist financing? Because someone goes on holiday to the south of Turkey does not make them a terrorist financier. But if someone goes to the south of Turkey and then their accounts go dark for 3 weeks, maybe that does indicate some, ulterior motive, some ulterior practice. Very interesting area. We look at the funding techniques and some of the challenges in firms for dealing with that approach as well. Now, if you look at this map here, we have the former USSR. We have, a constantly changing structure in the world in terms of geopolitical positioning. If you look at a great example there, the change that's undergoing all over the world, Russia, Ukraine, the breakup of the USSR, all of these huge events have had a direct knock-on to the impact of the way transnational crime has grown in the past 15, 20 years, and the rise of regulatory responses and the expectations on all of us in firms to fight organised crime and terrorist activity. So we do look at the evolution of regulation, and as Bill's mentioned, you cannot be a practitioner, a professional working in AML without understanding the global context. So we will look a lot at best practice and emerging trends in other jurisdictions, and the ICA is unique in that regard because we see all the large firms, we train all the large regulators around the world. Bill mentioned Moscow. I've trained the largest Russian bank, and of course they themselves are now subject to targeted economic sanctions. So a very important area of understanding this is also extraterritorial law. And I'm sure many of you, of course, know that we typically look across to our friends across the Atlantic when we talk about extraterritoriality. But of course, there are many, many other extraterritorial considerations that we need to think about. And I know a lot of you will work with organisations that operate, across the world in multiple jurisdictions. And that's one of the common questions I get. How do I deal with conflicting law or regulations in different countries? Even little things like I work for a multinational organisation and a customer is residing in one country, but they do an activity in another country. How and who do I report that to if I'm suspicious? So we'll look at the conflicts and more importantly, the emerging best practices around the world. It's a very interesting aspect of the course. Bill also alluded to the changing expectations around senior management. And of course, it's not just senior management. I don't know if any of you attended the ICA annual conference a few months ago, probably more than a few months ago now. There was a woman who was a former lead prosecutor at the FCA. She now works for a law firm. She was talking about, I guess, the exposure of professionals working in AML compliance. And there were grown men weeping as she was talking because it was absolutely terrifying. The level of I guess, alarm in the room was palpable because her point was that the risk and the expectation on all of us that want to work in this field is rising at an exponential rate. So part of what we're doing on these programs is giving you the tools to be an effective practitioner and to demonstrate your competence. And what's worrying, when you look at thematic reviews like this one from the regulator, you still see worrying levels of lack of competency, lack of knowledge, and not just amongst rank and file people in firms, but people who are working as MLROs with just fundamental lack of knowledge. Now, one of the things you'll find, and Bill's alluded to this as well, was the course is fantastic for helping you understand what good looks like, what best practice is. You will be in a room with 25 other practitioners from a range of industry sectors, some regulators, some law enforcement people, but it's incredibly useful to benchmark what good looks like. I think professionally, what's helped me the most in my career is developing those professional networks, talking to other practitioners. When it comes to AML, GRC, financial crime, we do tend to share good practice amongst ourselves, because we are all kindred spirits. And this course will definitely help you understand those networks. So, in terms of the key AML knowledge that we'll get, the risk-based approach, I'm sure, is a mantra you've all heard, but we'll be talking about, what is an effective risk-based approach? And we'll be looking at examples of people that have done it badly, and how you actually do an effective risk-based approach. Risk assessment, very important, very key aspect of AML. New technology, fascinating area. So we work very, very closely with new technology companies. I feel the need to show you a mobile phone. You all know what they look like, but these things have just revolutionised financial services. So we'll look at things like M-Pesa, which is sort of sweeping through Africa. I've just got back from, I'm sure they wouldn't mind me saying, I've just got back from a week training PayPal in Dublin. PayPal is a bank, and they obviously are very cutting edge, but they have a lot of risk in terms of AML, sanctions risk, etc. We'll also be looking at virtual currencies, prepaid cards, and it's moving so rapidly that global regulation is struggling to keep up. We'll look at the vulnerabilities and some of the areas where there is movement as well in new technology. The international regulation framework, the more sad people amongst us will have been excited and thrilled when we finally got our 4th EU directive. But of course, it's not just the 4th EU directive, is it? We live in a constant tsunami of regulatory change. And one of the challenges is how do you keep your firm apprised of what's coming and position yourself accordingly? So we obviously, that's a massive part of the program, looking at where we're going with regulation on the course. Well, I wish I had more time to talk to you about this subject. My goodness, CDD, customer due diligence, beneficial ownership. The key focus here has been transparency. We know that organised criminals, corrupt politicians, they don't walk into banks, do they? They send in front men, front companies, and they conceal their involvement. And the global community is trying to respond to this threat, but my goodness, it's a war. It really is. And we're finding out, when we're looking on the course at what good practice looks like in terms of doing customer due diligence. One of the biggest changes I've seen, and I know Bill would agree with this, is we are training, in banks, tens of thousands of relationship managers in AML. And historically, those guys, AML to them was seen as an annoying add-on to their role. They know now, these guys, that it's a core skill, and they know it's key. They don't want to do the wrong sort of business anymore. So you are seeing a fundamental shift in mindset, even in salespeople, if you like. And a salesperson is not a dirty term, but these guys are remunerated historically on bringing new clients on. They know now that doing CDD properly to the new expectation, the new standards, is core to their role. And we'll talk about what that new standard looks like. This area as well, really interesting one. We get quite a lot of people who've not come from a trade background. So roughly 80% of the world's trade is done on what we call an open account basis, where somebody's exporting goods from one country to another. And the only reason they would get a bank involved maybe is to effect a payment through, say, a SWIFT payment. Now, that scenario is exploited on a massive scale by money launderers, terrorists, and corrupt politicians to move value around the world. Less than 2% of containers ever get opened and inspected in a big industrial port. So lying about what's in containers, faking paperwork, is how organised crime are moving value covertly around the world. 20% of the world's trade involves banks in a more structured way through documentary trade finance products. Some of you will be familiar with these products, letters of credit, guarantees, where the banks are reviewing huge bundles of documents. And the challenge is, how do you really know what the reality is under that transaction? So we'll look at that as well. Again, as Bill's alluded to, the qualification ranges from entry level right up to a new postgraduate diploma that I think Bill's going to be talking about later today. Here's just a very quick example. We will look at real cases of money laundering. Fascinating case, this. Lebanese-Canadian bank. So very briefly, drugs originating from South America being exported into Benin in West Africa, where the drugs are then smuggled into West Europe. So historically, a lot of the drugs coming into Western Europe have been through West Africa. Now, it's changing slightly. In the meantime, used cars being imported into Benin in West Africa, real used cars being sold on the street for cash. The drug money is then smuggled back after it's been sold in the streets in Europe, and our classic money laundering technique of intermingling is undertaken, where the proceeds from the car sales are mixed up with the drug money. Then that drug money is sent into informal currency exchange houses, black money, unregulated exchange houses where you can get better rates than the official government rates. And these informal exchange houses have featured in money laundering schemes all over the world, most notably Latin America. Then these exchange houses had accounts with Lebanese Canadian Bank. That's how these properties are getting into the mainstream financial system. The risk here, and the contagion, is that Lebanese Canadian Bank also had correspondent bank accounts with main tier 1 financial institutions. So they were dragged into this as well. Then some of the money went back to fund more used car purchases. So this was a self-perpetuating money laundering scheme. The rest of the funds went to China, where they were used to buy real goods, consumer goods, children's toys, electronics. Then they were shipped back to South America, where they were sold in markets, and that profit was then passed back to the drug dealers, and that's how they realised their profit. That is a global money laundering ring which involves trade, it involves correspondent banks, and we'll look at the reality of this on the course. I'm conscious of time, but we have a range of different qualifications now, not just focused purely on AML. Bill's mentioned the CDD course, very interesting program on practical customer due diligence, specialist certificates in private banking, correspondent banking, and sanctions risk, and trade finance as well. So again, in the interest of time, the CDD process, we look at this from start to end and the interrelationships with other aspects of AML. Source of funds, source of wealth, very interesting areas. How far do you have to go? We train a lot of casinos, land-based and internet. The big clubs in London, Mayfair, they get Abramovich-level customers who will spend £5 million a night. They have to ask the source of wealth question there. They do it over a cocktail. They'll get the club manager to buy the new customer a cocktail over the bar, and they'll ask them, how have you made your money? I would love to be a fly on a wall on those conversations. Of course, they verify it independently. So, screening, adverse media, PEPs, these are all things we'll explore on the program as well. And some of the examples we look at of bad practice are actually quite striking. I won't go through this one in depth, but the gist is this person has been onboarded, a restaurateur, has declared his income at around £20,000 per annum, and when the regulator came in and looked at the actual activity on that account, look at this, 900,000 washing through the account in 3 years. That's either a very busy restaurant, pizzeria or kebab shop, whatever it is, or something strange is going on, isn't it? And the regulator is still finding examples of firms not acting on this stuff. So sanctions as well. We do look at practical examples as well as theory on this course, really important. So this is an extract from a SWIFT message. This was flagged up in a bank. Banks will have to deal with these. And the problem with this is this word here, Azam, which actually is the name of an Iranian vessel, which is on an OFAC sanctions list. Sometimes fairly innocuous things trigger these hits. What do you have to do to build an system to review these potential sanctions issues, document your decision, and decide whether it really is a true hit or not? And we'll look at that sort of stuff on the course as well. Okay, this are some glowing testimonials, and I know we've got Stephen who's going to say a little bit about his experience in a minute. People genuinely enjoy the course, and we get fantastic feedback. So people enjoy it, and they get an awful lot out of it. I think that's probably all I want to say there. And again, unfortunately, Lee's not been able to join us today, but we've got, as I say, the Illuminati sat down here on the front row, who are all fantastic trained. That sounds a bit sinister, doesn't it? I shouldn't have said that. But they are, they're all fantastic trainers with a great wealth of industry experience, and they're very engaging in the workshop. So I think you will enjoy it. So that's probably all I want to say. I think I might probably run over for time. I don't know, but shall I hand over to Stephen? I think you were going to say a few words if I can. So thank you. Do you want the clicker? If you want, it's up to you. I think you've only got the one slide, haven't you? Don't know if you might. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Stephen McKellar. I work in EY for the Financial Crime Advisory practice. I actually completed my diploma in 2012, and for me, it allowed me to progress within the industry that I worked in. I worked in electronic money at the time, And for me, it gave me practical skills that allowed me to go back to my firm and actually use the benchmark best practices and incorporate them into what we did on a day-to-day basis. Also, the benefit that it gave me was that it allowed me to progress quite quickly in that firm. It allowed me to create my own kind of role. The training and the professional development that I had allowed me to also move into consulting. So I moved from industry into consulting, where the useful parts of this course are that it's the broad aspects as well. So you get to understand the various industries and the requirements, and also you get to network with people that from those industries. So you get to understand the best practice for other industries, for your industry. You know what people are doing at that time and what actually works within your industry. What should you be doing? What are others doing? And also, I think the important thing is that's the way that regulators might perceive your firm as well. They will benchmark you to others within your industry. And I think it's an absolutely fantastic course, because for me, it gave me the confidence to actually take forward to senior people in the firm that I worked for sign off on best practice, policies, requirements that should have actually probably been there originally, but at the same time it allowed me to actually develop that framework, the whole AML framework, which then gave me that push to actually then progress my career. So, and also right now I'm actually studying the postgraduate diploma, so I've gone from the diploma all the way through. So I think for me it's the networking, the best practice, and that exposure to the technical knowledge, which I don't think you get anywhere else. That's
Great, thank you. Thanks. So the check's in the post, mate. That's great, fantastic. But you know, that's really helpful. And you know, we've got. If you do want to talk to any of the guys here, I know they'd be happy to have a chat with you. We've got. And thanks again for coming, guys. And just to give you a bit of an insight into the reality of doing the program or doing the programs, you know, and I think that would be helpful. So I think we've just got a couple of minutes for Q&A. If anyone has any questions about the AML programs, happy to field those now. If anyone wants to raise anything. Oh, yes, we have one. Thank goodness for that.
Quick question on the specialist betting and gaming.
Yes.
I read it's delivered. I mean, is this delivered with workshops or is this delivered online? What's the...
Really good question. So the specialist certificates are available online, purely online, so you can do it effectively through distance learning study. You can access all the course materials. There's webinars. We do what's called integrated learning. So you have course manuals, you have webinars, you have further reading. You can interact with a dedicated tutor, and then at the end of it, when you feel you're ready, you can do the online assessment. But we also offer those programs on a face-to-face basis, so there'll be a one-day workshop, and you can come along and, again, interact with other practitioners in a face-to-face environment. So the answer is both options are available. And what we tend to do is we run the specialist certificates on a sort of rolling basis throughout the year. And also we do offer them on an in-house basis, so if a firm comes to us and said we've got 15, 20 people we think would benefit from this, we can run it in-house as well.
Does that mean that it's possible to run two programs at the same time then? So, for example, the specialist and one that...
Definitely. So they're designed to be more bite-sized qualifications. I wouldn't recommend doing two diplomas at once. I think that would be, what's the word I'm looking for? Dangerous? Ill-advised. Ambitious, thank you, Joe. But I think certainly a specialist certificate and a diploma, it'd be a lot of work, but it'd probably be just about manageable. They're designed, really, just so you know, the specialist certificates are designed for practitioners who've maybe done other qualifications and they want to expand their knowledge in a particular area. So, for example, you've never had an exposure to betting and gaming or trade finance or correspondent banking. But they're also designed for people who actually work in that field as well. So that it's sort of, a dual approach, really.
Hi. As someone who's looking at coming to this field in a career change, would you look at, in terms of the certificate and the advanced certificates, what would be your opinion on going in at, say, the different levels?
Well, I think the answer is probably best if we have a chat afterwards, because it depends on A, your background, B, I mean, for example, some people that come into the program have never studied at sort of, the diplomas are graduate level courses. But people come into that level even though they've never worked in a regulated AML role, and what we generally advise is we give them some additional support and we maybe support their studies with a tutor, a mentor type person. It depends on A, your previous experience, your level of education, and your ambitions, really. So the answer is, if anyone's wrestling, and there are probably lots of other people wrestling with exactly that question, please grab one, either myself or one of the team, and we can talk to you on a one-to-one basis. We can try and give you our views on what level would be best for you. But do you know my honest opinion? If you're really torn, I would go for the diploma, because I think the diploma is the gold standard qualification, which is the sort of recognised, I don't know, pinnacle's quite the right word, now we have the PG dip, but it's sort of the gold standard. But yeah, let's have a chat, sort of one-to-one. That'd be great. Sorry, there's a question down the back, and there's a lady up here after that, Joe, as well. If we could, there's a gentleman up here.
How you doing?
Hi.
I'm currently studying the advanced certificate.
Yeah.
And I've got an exam next week. Is
Good
it
luck.
a precursor to join any of the diplomas that I've got to pass that?
No, it's not. So you look quite relaxed and confident, so I'm sure you'll be fine. You do, I believe, Joe's looking at me, you do get a partial dispensation, don't you? No, you don't. Forget, I shouldn't have said that. Okay, so that's totally rubbish. Ignore that. So the answer is no, it's not a prerequisite. So by some catastrophe, you didn't quite manage to succeed this time, you could go on and enrol. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I mean, the majority of people that sit the advanced certificate do pass. So, you know, have you had your assignment result back yet? I don't want to get too personal in front of the room. But, so you know what you've got to achieve, don't you? So the short answer is no, and it will put you in really good stead. The qualifications are designed to be complementary. So it really is going to help you go straight into the diploma because you've done the advanced cert.
So I could start the diploma irrespective of the results?
Even if you're still waiting on the results, yeah.
Yeah, hi. I have... It's him.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I lost, sorry.
I have a question on the workshop. So,
Yes.
Just for a reason, somebody missed one of the workshop because they're not in the country or something like that.
Yeah, it happens a lot, no problem. Two things I would say. Because we have such demand for the programs, there are usually a group of workshops running. So even if you miss one specific day, we'll talk to us and we'll see if we can get you to another date. Even if you can't do that, let's say you're on holiday for a couple of weeks or you're travelling on business, what we always say is, let us know, we send you a copy of the workshop materials, and then we would arrange a phone call with a tutor to just run through some key points or any questions you had. So it's fine. It happens all the time, you can imagine, because the program lasts for 9 to 12 months. So obviously, quite often, sometimes people have to go away or it just can't be avoided. It's very common. And, you know, obviously it's very important you go to as many of the workshops as you can, but it happens, and, you know, we absolutely can mitigate that.
But can they attend in some other territory? Like if they miss in London,
yes,
can they go
yeah,
Birmingham
quite possible. Oh yeah, definitely. Birmingham, all around the UK, they're running the same program. We could even, Michelle and Joe will kill me for saying this, we could even probably, you know, for example, you're travelling in another jurisdiction and there was an ICA program running, we could get you along to that as well. But certainly it runs all through the UK. So yeah, there's a lot of flexibility there. And I probably should say, not just in individual workshops, but quite often people are halfway through the program and something happens momentous, like a life issue, life change, or work relocation, or key project. So we're very flexible about deferring the study, that sort of thing. I think I'm being told to bring it to a close there. If there are more questions waiting to be asked, you can always grab us anyway. So thank you very much for your attention. I'll perhaps hand back to Bill.
Okay, everybody. Can I introduce now Chad Lawson from Robert Walters, who's going to talk to you about opportunities and careers in compliance. Just while Chad's getting ready there, could I also mention at the break, which will follow this, the academics will be outside and happy to take any questions, the administrators. We've also, on the ICA stand outside, you've got the 3 chief examiners there. So you've got Andrew McKinley, Sharon Ward and Carla Howell for all the 3 areas. If you want to talk about assessments and examination or anything of that nature, they're all there. So you've got a whole host of people to answer all your individual queries. They're dying to speak to you. Okay? So without further ado, can I then pass that on to Chad?
Yeah, no, we're just waiting for the flicker. I think maybe do it here.
I'll do it here for you.
Yeah, no worries. Oh, found it. Perfect. All right, so just quickly, my name's Chad Lawson. I'm the Associate Director for the Risk and Compliance Divisions at Robert Walters. So I will today, this is a bit of an overview. So firstly, just quickly about us in terms of what we do and sort of why I'm here. We'll give a market overview, which will probably echo some of Bill's initial sentiments in regards to what's happening in the market. And then we'll talk about, talk about careers in compliance and sort of pathways into it, and some of the benefits of careers in compliance as well. And then finally, just a Q&A, any questions from the audience. So firstly, just about us and the compliance division that I run. So firstly, our firm was set up in 1985 by Rob, who's still our CEO, and he still works in a London office. We cover, I guess, all areas of professional services, but specifically I look after compliance. We are at 53 locations across 24 countries, and obviously London is head office, and we're listed here in the UK. The compliance division that I run was set up in 2001, so we're a long-standing compliance division, mainly focused within financial services, within that covering investment banks, private wealth managers, hedge funds, retail banks, asset managers. I run a team of 9 specialist consultants. To put that in perspective in regards to where the market has changed, it's doubled in the last 2 years. So we've reacted to the market in regards to the size of our team to cover the volume of work that is coming through. We also have a team in Manchester, in Birmingham and Milton Keynes, covering financial services centres there. A lot of banks are starting to nearshore functions out to these areas. I also collaborate with my teams in New York, in Hong Kong, in Sydney. Obviously I'm from Sydney, so it helps. Paris, Dubai. We've got compliance specialists across the globe that we network with for vacancies and also for candidates. Compliance market overview. So some of these statistics, either from surveys from our clients that we speak to or from statistics that are on websites in regards to job volumes. But again, it will echo what Bill said in regards to what's happening in the compliance industry in general. So at the moment, from our survey from our clients, 72% of our employers or our clients are saying they're affected by talent shortages. Everyone will hear about compliance being a busy area. It is, and in recruitment term, it's a candidate short market. Over 2/3 of these employers we speak to say they do not have a plan for managing these shortages. So they're scrambling around for talent, essentially. The statistics here is 2.6 jobs for every candidate. Now, that we run a survey of vacancies online across a number of different websites. We use a third-party supplier to do this, and they present this information. So 2.6 compliance jobs for every candidate that is registered as looking for a job on those websites. The second section to talk about is the vacancies at an all-time high. So again, with the same data we looked at, 13% increase year on year in June this year in terms of vacancies that are released. And also it's interesting to note they're 31% from June to July. So generally in summer in the recruitment world, it will slow down because of summer. But compliance and industry against the trend had increased 31% across that period of time. And the last point there, so London and the Northwest are the busiest areas of growth for compliance. You'll find that a lot of banks are nearshoring functions, HSBC to Birmingham, Deutsche Bank's doing a lot of functions to Birmingham as well, Manchester with RBS. So a lot of firms are redeploying their compliance staff into these areas as well. In terms of where we're seeing the hiring across the market, so there's a few core areas there you can see. It's anything that's sort of regulatory-based recruitment, we'd say. So some of the key areas, so compliance monitoring, governance, controls and testing. Anything as a second line review of functions is extremely in vogue in recruitment. We're seeing a lot of horizon scanning, regulatory advisory functions being built up. So looking at what's coming in and how it will impact the business. And also policy development internally for these banks. Financial crime, so across AML advisory, sanctions screening, a lot of second line assurance functions of these first line functions are being built out, and we're seeing new teams created for these areas. And also finally where we're seeing is in the investment banking side and the global market side is product advisory, advising on new products, also new areas to move into from a sales perspective. But we're seeing a lot of that. And finally there, obviously, the growth is predicted for next year. So in my role and my team's role, we're speaking to a lot of clients and hiring managers, heads of compliance and MLROs. They're talking about plans for next year, and it is bigger than what it was this year in terms of growth. And that will probably be unique in regards to the rest of the financial services industry. We're reading that some are cutting jobs, some are freezing in terms of hiring this time of the year. Most of our clients are talking about the increase in hiring and compliance and the need for robust compliance infrastructure. So again, this is a bit more about sort of an overview here. And again, this is a survey. Some of the information on the right there is about what we surveyed our clients and the questions we asked them and what they're seeing. So our managers are frustrated with lack of talent. There's a lack of immediate direct fit that they're finding in the market, and 64% of them felt that the candidates lacked the right technical skills. And also 32% feel there's overall lack of quantity coming through for jobs. So not enough CVs being sent, not enough people in the market to satisfy their requirements. And so what we're seeing is alternative talent streams that are being considered, and we're trying to sell to hiring managers to fill these roles. They come from audit, from operations, from legal backgrounds, paralegals, from front office or sales areas. We're seeing a lot of these people move in to compliance should they have the right qualifications. So career in compliance and why you should have a career in compliance, and obviously I think you're all here because of that. We talked about before the increased profile of a compliance officer. There is, again, going back 10 years ago, there was probably less of a profile. It was seen as more of a sort of really back office role and a processing function, a need to have, but not a helpful function. These days, it's seen as an integral part of the bank in terms of ensuring they are not going to get a huge fine and they are making money appropriately. There's a lot of high-level stakeholder engagements. A lot of the heads of compliance are sitting on boards now, so there's a huge profile for people in compliance. It's an interesting, challenging roles with critical importance. So the roles aren't now just box ticking as before or just doing a process. It's now actually changing. There's changing functions. A lot of it is regulatory driven, so you need to look at forward thinking in regards to where things to come. But also it's problem solving and supporting a business in regards to how they can actually perform better. There are fast-track career opportunities. So again, previously there were small teams, it was a job for life. These days, the teams are growing and there's a lot of opportunity to get involved with compliance and grow up that ladder internally. So as the growth is predicted to continue in these businesses, we'd expect this to continue as well. And also because of the profile, and because of the access to people internally, good talent is exposed. So people can see good talent from the business, reward them and promote them internally. And finally, which is also very importantly, compensation benefits. We are seeing a huge increase in regards to the base salary expectations, but also what we're seeing the paying in the market. For a lot of people, they're increasing year on year. At some point, we need to flatten out. But it's definitely a rewarding industry to be in financially. And also, there's increased recognition of importance with higher variable component, meaning bonuses, essentially, better bonuses for people who are going to be moving into compliance. So how do you get in? Again, it's unlike, if you're a lawyer, you probably go through a law firm, and if you're an accountant, you probably go through one of the big four, or another accounting firm, sorry. But for compliance, there's no real defined career path. And as the industry grows, it's very hard to find a channel in. So what we find is either graduate schemes, we'll go through the graduate schemes, and banks are increasing these. They develop talent internally from different areas, or they'll transfer people from other industries to come across. So the next point down is the hiring managers we speak to are looking for a reason to hire, whereas previously, going back even before 2009, people were not looking for a reason to hire, they were looking for a reason not to hire someone. So what this means is to make yourself attractive, qualifications definitely help. So if you're looking to move from one industry to the other, the better qualified you are and the more you can explain that you understand that industry, the more likely you are to get that job. And the last point there is just the higher profile, again, the higher interest and the more competition is. Again, everyone's listening and understanding that compliance is a very interesting industry to be in. It's a very rewarding area. So people are looking to make the most of this boom and move into the discipline. So the better you are in regards to setting your CV up from a qualification standpoint, and the more you can do to show that you are interested in moving into this area from a different discipline, the more likely you are to get that job. So I thought just quickly on a case study. So I went back when I knew I was doing this today, was having a look at the candidates we're placing in the market with what qualifications they have. And this sort of presents, I believe, an example of someone who's moved into a financial crime role from a different industry and the benefit of having a qualification that will give you. So as you see there, a graduate, paralegal, operations, and into an onboarding role. And after qualifying with a ICA qualification there in 2013, we placed this candidate into a financial crime advisory role, reporting up into the MLRO at a leading US investment bank. So this is one of many examples I could find when I was looking at my database and who we are placing in the industry. So it does show that there is a pathway into the industry with further qualifications to improve your CV. And this is a key thing. I think if someone didn't have some of the qualifications, it might be harder for them to move into this area because technically they would like to try and get a like-for-like hire from a similar investment bank. But as that talent is now harder to find, they're looking for a reason to hire that person, and a qualification like this would definitely help you. So from my perspective, that's it. Any questions for me? Open the floor up on careers or opportunities or how to enter the industry. Someone in the front here.
Hi, starting at a basic level, what kind of career path do you think that a person can go through if they're starting just for a certificate for AML?
So,
if
say it again,
they're
sir?
getting into the industry and they just want just a broad understanding.
Yeah.
What kind of career path do you think that?
Well, similar to the one before, I think that you'll find, depending on what qualification you do and what area you want to go into, financial AML and financial crime is probably the most likely area. We find a lot of people go into an onboarding function, which is probably a bit more of a process-driven role before getting a qualification and moving across. So that could be one entry level into it. Some people would enter into operations, but generally I think that there is that you need to come into a more of an operational sort of an onboarding function before moving across into an AML advisory role where you're actually looking at more of an investigations type function. I hope that answers the question. Back there.
What's the split that you're seeing between fixed-term contracts and permanents?
Between fixed-term or just general contracts and permanents?
And permanents, yeah.
We're seeing a push for more permanent hiring. People are trying to fill permanent headcount. It's costly to hire people on a contractual basis. But in saying that, we still a high volume of contract. The growth we've seen in vacancies has been on the permanent side. The contract vacancies have been relatively static year on year. Increase in daily rate expectations from contractors in specific demand areas. Most of these are going to be probably in regulatory advisory when there is a looming deadline to face, or if there's a significant issue. So if someone needs to come and do a whole remediation activity across KYC files, they'll get in a team of contractors to do that. But generally the increase we've seen is on the permanent side, as they try to build these teams out to show that they've got stable infrastructure from a compliance perspective. Question.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, one more.
In terms of hiring, what's the split between supporting BAU activities and support for any change programs?
That's a good question. There's a grey line between BAU and change. A lot of these BAU roles now do pretty much our change role because they have to be involved with that on a regular basis. We're seeing less. So if I look at what I call BAU roles in what we recruit for, so if we're looking at central compliance functions, or in control room or surveillance, we've seen less of that in terms of hiring. We've seen more roles being created in regulatory advisory and in change functions and also in AML governance. So if you're saying AML governance, they're not really a BAU role because they're doing a lot of sort of reviews and of the actual function. But yeah, probably more on the change side, but again, it's a blurred line between the two. I think at the time.
One more here.
Yeah, okay. My background is I'm a chartered banker and I did the CPGDL to come into law, and I'm now doing the LLM oil, gas and mining in Nottingham Law School. And I have become interested in this. There are two electives which are introduction to regulation, which is part of regulation compliance, and also there's one on security, regulation, governance and risk and other things. Imagine I take these two papers and add them to the LLM program which I'm doing, taking into consideration the fact that I'm a chartered banker. How do I get into this direction? If imagine I decide not to do the bar program and I want to go into the compliance career.
It's probably best, we'll talk afterwards, you can come have a chat and we'll go through it in detail because it's quite a unique situation, we can help you out with that one.
Individual opportunities like that, the team can talk to you about that and have a chat with me because, I mean, with a legal background, I can perhaps advise you if we have a little chat in a minute. Okay, so can we have a break now? Just because of the timing and because we're being filmed online, can we try and get back, take 15 minutes, get your coffee, tea, and then let's get back in because we've got a packed program. Thank you.
Something for everyone. There's people for auditing, for ethics, for compliance, for governance, for everything. So if you want to be really a leading edge professional, this is the place to be.
put it on now.
That's now ready. Your slide's the next one.
That's great. Thank you.
Where do you want me to go?
Well, you're going to be on. Billy's only speaking very short.
Yeah.
So Billy will be. Right. Yep. And I'll sit back.
I'm doing GRC. So you have to.
Who's doing financial crime afterwards?
It's Becca.
It's Becca.
Yeah.
Where's Becca? Is she?
That's Becca.
Slides up there. We know where you are.
GRC.
GRC.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Okay, welcome back everybody. You've heard obviously from Becca about discipline and the opportunities there and the content of the programme. Moving on through those different pathways, the next one is governance, risk or compliance or regulatory compliance, call it what you want. And I'd like to introduce Virry Chowan, who's the global head of GRC within ICT. And then he's going to be ably assisted by the UK head of compliance, who's Jonathan Bolton. So can I hand over to you then, Virry?
Thank you, Bill. Welcome, everyone. I've been with ICT for 6 months now, and I have to say it's a real privilege to work with so many talented people globally, in the UK, Europe, Far East, US, and hopefully working with you in the future. There's a common strain with the tutors at ICA and ICT, and that common strain is that they really love what they do, and it's remarkable. I've sat in on many, many different tutors, most of these at the front here, and they're really passionate. In my previous lives, I've done a lot of training and sat in on many, many training sessions, and I've been falling asleep. But what's really good about this is that when these people are so passionate, that goes on to you. So, why are you here? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? You're here for skills development. You may be looking for a move. The many, many reasons: curiosity, career advancement. For me, compliance is the career of choice. Prior to compliance, I was a lawyer, I was an engineer, I worked in aerospace, I worked in telcos, and I remember in about 2003 I was working in financial crime for France Telecom, and I had the responsibility of training 200,000 people in the area of fraud across 45 jurisdictions. And I was sitting in the CFO's office of a $45 billion turnover company, and I had to convince her to make compliance sexy. And I did, and that was then when compliance was just tick box. And then more recently, I've moved into academia. I've taught at Bristol Law School in financial crime and business. And all of these industries are taking compliance really seriously. I remember talking to Jonathan Fisher, QC. Now, some of you may know him. He was instrumental in advising the government when the libel scandal broke, and he gave a talk at Bristol Law School, and we were chatting, and at the time he was instrumenting the reckless management offence for bankers who cause their banks to fail. Now, this is now enshrined in law. All of us are involved in these events which are happening on a global level. You've seen the libel scandal. Tom Hayes got convicted for fraud for 14 years. Some may think it was harsh, but don't forget, he was on $2 million a year. The interesting thing about that is that he's appealing his sentence just yesterday, so watch out for that one. And these are all the things that... So why is compliance a good industry to get into now? Well, we've heard Bill and other people talk about needing more people. So I've just got a few slides to show you. So just in banking alone, the litigation costs have cost 260 billion, with 60 billion more to come. And that's just in banking. You know, you've got other industries like aerospace. Rolls-Royce bribery case still hasn't come to any conclusion yet. The regulation is really complex. On the one hand, you've got the regulators saying we're going to increase regulation. We're talking about the senior manager regime. We're talking about the reckless management offence, which is jail time for banking staff. On the other hand, we've got George Osborne and Sajid Javid talking about deregulating. Where do we stand? It's quite complex. David Cameron talking about making companies more transparent so that the beneficial ownership can be more revealed to stop corrupt illicit payments coming through the UK system. What this means is that, yes, there may be more or less regulation, there's more complication, but for compliance professionals, what that means is that there's more demand for people like us. And lastly, I think this is just a snapshot of what I picked up this morning from a report from Barclays Simpson. These are the jobs currently advertised. No, these are the jobs currently posted. Now, these are at the high end, but you can see where it's going. So I'd like you to leave you with that and introduce Jonathan Bowdler, UK Head of GRC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie. So far we've done passion, sex, and just done the money. Who'd have thought it in a compliance presentation? Hey. Okay, what I'd like to do is just talk a little bit around the governance, risk, and compliance courses that we offer, and why it's such a great time to be involved in this part of the industry, and what we can do for you. Okay, so let me start off. Why is it so exciting? Becca, no, it wasn't Becca, it was Chad, mentioned change because a question came from the floor. Change or BAU? In our area, BAU is change. Full stop. You are risk managers, you are change managers, as well as having to be experts in your field. If there was no change, we'd all be out of a job. So welcome it, embrace it. The problem is, of course, we have to encourage our business to see change as a positive, as a good thing. And the real challenge of those working in the GRC area is showing the business the value that we bring to them. But the constant change gives us constant opportunity. The next thing is the way in which our role has changed. Now, I started in compliance in 2001, and I was the business prevention unit, and I was sat on my own, and people saw me coming and hid or sudden deviation into another office or another corridor. Now, they come and find you. They need you. Without you and without your advice and your guidance, they cannot achieve their objectives. So the role of compliance, the way it is viewed, has considerably improved, but so therefore have the demands. The demands on those people working in those roles to understand their business and to be able to give good advice so that the business can achieve its objectives. The business doesn't exist to be compliant. That's not the role of a business. The role of a business is to grow, whether it's to make money for its shareholders or whatever its strategic objective might be. is not to be compliant, but our role is to help them achieve those objectives within a heavily regulated industry. And as the regulation either increases or becomes more complex, then our role becomes more important for the business achieving those objectives. I love the fact that we have moved away from a more technical tick box approach, or even just a simple, this is the rule, we must follow it, how can we follow it? Or if you want to take the legal advice, how can we get around it? Okay? That doesn't work anymore. That doesn't wash. It's now about, well, how are we behaving? How are we arriving at the decisions we arrive at? There's a clue in the name of the main regulator. It's not called the Financial Conduct Authority accidentally. Conduct is simply another word for behavior. So this focus on behavior and ethics has to be embraced. It's not going to go away. The fact that our roles have developed into this much more influential position within a firm, and you might be on the board, you might be reporting to the board, certainly more visible, and certainly have more authority than you used to have, means that we can actually make a difference in our businesses. Now, if you talk to some of the consultants here, sat in the front row, or other consultants in the business, they'll be talking, and they're saying, well, we've got to be cutting edge when it comes to regulatory compliance. How can compliance help your firm gain an advantage, gain a competitive edge? Why not? Becca did allude to the fact that we do share ideas in our areas, whether it be financial crime, ALM, or compliance. And of course, we'll share best practice. But don't forget, whoever does it best has an advantage for their business. If you're all in a heavily regulated arena, then whoever does the regulatory risk management best gives an advantage to their firm. I wrote my master's dissertation on obtaining competitive advantage from compliance in financial services firms in the UK. And yes, it was as dull as it sounds. But I did that in 2003. It was there from day one. And gradually, the industry has caught up with that. And at ICA, when I joined there 7.5 years ago, we've always had that at the core of our work. How can you use regulatory compliance for the benefit of your organization, as well as, of course, for you in your career? And then finally, the career structure itself, brilliant. Entry level to the board. What more could you possibly want? And if you say, well, hang on, what about a bit of variety? How many of you who have worked in a compliance or regulated role have ever done the same job for more than about 12 months? The constant change is always there. So you can even have the same job title for 2 or 3 years, but you won't be doing the same job. So again, for those people that enjoy change, enjoy influence, then compliance is a career to go for. What's happening at the moment? Well, these are just some examples. The whole thing about regaining the trust of the industry through cultural change. But you say it's a current hot topic, or rather I say it's a current hot topic. It takes 5 to 10 years to change culture, so that's not going to go away. The governance and accountability through the new senior managers regime. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the moment. Now, there are ways in which you can influence behavior at senior manager level. Some of them are positive, encouraging them, showing them the benefits of compliance, which is my favorite phrase of all, the benefits of compliance. But if you need to get the big stick out, the senior management regime is a very big stick. And so we've got to understand what that means to our organizations, what it means to the senior management, what it means, of course, to the senior compliance or risk professionals, because you will be captured by the senior management regime. A couple of things around how the regulator, their power and influence is changing. Vivi just made a very good comment. And we look at the evolution of financial services. It is intrinsically linked to political change. Every time we change government in this country, they change the regulatory structure. We look at that, we try and understand why that is the case. So we do a little bit of politics, the socio-economic development in the country, and how that affects the regulatory environment. And with now a Conservative government, if you like, off the leash of the coalition, we are seeing change again. Martin Wheatley didn't want to resign. That is political interference, or political influence, shall we say. The new structure of the PRA. That, again, is a political decision. So understanding this just makes the whole thing really interesting. And then, of course, is regulation, is the scope going to increase? Is it going to shrink? Is it going to become more principles and ethics-based? Or are we going to see a return to some more rules-based in certain areas? The thing is, you always have a complete mix, and you have to understand what is happening at any one time. And I thought I'd put the money on there just in case it hadn't come up, because we all like talking about money, don't we? But remuneration changes behavior. And don't forget, behavior is what it's all about now, certainly at senior management level. So I said I'd mention the senior management's regime in a little more detail. It's probably a little bit of scaremongering to say you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent. But it's a nice phrase, and let's face it, scaremongering is something we have to do every now and again to get people's attention. But the detail behind it, the understanding of accountability at senior management level, is incredibly important. You've got to make sure your staff understand this. Certainly, anybody who's captured by the senior management regime, absolutely critical they understand their responsibilities. But now we have the two new levels below it. The certification regime for material risk takers, which has to follow the remuneration code, and the new conduct rules that affect everybody. And we're only 8 months away from the beginning of this, and then with another year of transformation before everything comes on stream. So, fantastic hot topic, and if you do any of our qualifications, particularly the GRC or the compliance, regulatory compliance qualifications, we will be talking a lot about the senior management's regime. And not just about how do you comply with it, how do you use it? How can you utilize this as an opportunity within your business? Okay, I just want to finish off with a couple of points on what we cover within the course. Within the course, we start off with basic understanding. And I say basic understanding because it's amazing how many people who work in compliance in the UK can't tell me what the objectives of the regulator are. Some can, some can't. And then I say, what are the 11 principles of the FCA? And in 7.5 years, how many people do you think have been able to tell me the 11 principles of the FCA without looking them up? Let's have a guess. Come on, wakey wakey. What you got to do is shout out a number. Very good, nearly 0. It was 1, and that was 6 months ago. I think that is astonishing. How can you work in the regulatory regime without understanding some of these key fundamental basics? How many enforcement cases have there been in the UK that have not involved a principal breach since 2007? Shout out the same number. 0. Okay? If you comply with the principles, you do not go into enforcement action. 10 years of experience. And yet people can't tell us what they are. So we do some of the technical pieces. We do look at some of the rules. But we then focus on implementation. We focus on how you can make GRC, governance, risk and compliance, effective in the success of your business. So the first line in the sand might be no breaches, but you can have no breaches by throwing money at it. You don't want to throw money at it, you want to do it effectively. You want to do it in a way that helps the organisation achieve its objectives. We look at how you use the resources at your disposal effectively, both the internal resources, that's usually your staff, maybe some IT, maybe the rest of the business, and we look at external resources, like consultancy firms, like regulators themselves, and also the media and social media. All of these things come into the bigger picture of risk management. And we also then take a view on how we implement this knowledge. So what are you going to do in your organization? In our workshops, we design compliance functions. We look at risk management frameworks, and we ask you to apply it to your own business and your own firm. The assessments also allow you to take the knowledge and apply it to your own business, your own sector. So there's a lot you can do to customize the course for your own area of interest and your own firms. And at the end of the course, you will come out with a certificate, which, although very pretty and very nice, is at the end of the day just a piece of paper. What's more important is you'll come out at the end of the course with stuff up here, knowledge, information, learning. And that is what you can then use to meet your own personal potential. You will learn things on this course, and it may only at the end of the course be a dozen things that stick. And those dozen things can make a real difference to your career going forward. You'll have to learn more than a dozen things to pass the exam, by the way. But all of that knowledge, all of that learning brings you to a point at the end of the course where, yes, you're qualified, but you also have more knowledge to be able to, first of all, do your own current role better and reach the next role and even the role after it. A lot of our training is about how you learn, how you develop your skills, and you can carry that forward for the next 10 years, as well, of course, as doing CPD. I've got a lovely couple of quotes here as well from delegates. We all get them, and to be honest with you, the reason I think we all enjoy our job so much is because how many of you at the end of every day, or at least the end of our teaching day, how many of you get people coming up and saying, really enjoyed today, thank you so much? We get it nearly every day we teach. It's brilliant. And we get it because people are enjoying themselves as they learn, and that's how we teach. Because people can see the link as well between what they're learning and what they do in the workplace. So, best form of checking out if this is the right course for you, find people who have done them before and ask them for an honest opinion. And they will give you an honest opinion, and I 90% guarantee you'll then sign up for the course. Okay, I've got about 5 minutes left, which is nice. So, any questions? Dazzled into silence. Thank you.
Hi there. Quick question between the diploma and the postgraduate diploma. I think for me, I think hopefully also for others, it'd be important to understand the differences between the two programs and how they work.
Sorry, between the diploma and...
Diploma and the postgraduate diploma.
And the postgraduate, yeah, absolutely. There are 4 levels. Very briefly, the certificate and the advanced certificate, we would say are regulatory compliance. Now, when you get to the diploma and the postgraduate, we're talking about governance, risk and compliance, because we're talking more about the management. The diploma is, as Becca sort of said, our sort of gold standard program we've been running since day one. Very experienced in it, and it tells you both how to do the job and how to influence others, how to convince the board that you need the resources, how to convince the other functions in the business need to listen to you, need to come to you, so you can manage regulatory risk in the business. And it's a very practical course in that it gives you 2 opportunities through assignments to apply that knowledge, plus the exam at the end. There's a lot of cutting-edge material in there because we base it on what is happening in the market as we go along. The postgraduate is for those people who have at least 10 years industry experience, at least 3 years at board level or just reporting into the board, and it's a little bit more around the strategic direction of governance, risk and compliance. There's perhaps a little bit more focus on the governance and risk side of things and managing regulatory risk in the business. You will have more people on that who aren't actually full-time compliance professionals. There'll be directors, maybe chief operating officers, chief financial operators, who want to understand how they can use compliance or work with compliance for the benefit of their business. So it's more strategic. We also have 8 guest speakers who are leaders in their field who deliver half-day masterclasses, and it's all done at a residential weekend. So the diploma is a little bit more practical. How do I do my job? How do I become a head of compliance? Or how do I be a really effective head of compliance? The postgraduate, a little bit more cutting edge. Where are things going? How do I use it strategically for the benefit of my business? I think. We are doing a session at the end of today, if you can hang around until the end of the day, or come back, where we will talk about the postgraduate specifically. Is that okay? Okay? Anything else?
No?
Should we leave it there then? Anything from the
absolutely.
web?
Splendid. Thank you very much indeed, Jonathan. Going to ask Becca to come back now to talk about financial crime prevention, which again is one of the three main pillars, and say that the new 4th one, which is customer due diligence.
I do apologise. I didn't show the pictures, and Rod will get very upset in the corner here if I don't show Rod's picture. There's Rod, there's Viri, and that's me. Blurred deliberately. Okay.
Can you hear me okay? Is it on? Great. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Right, so what we're going to do now is have a look at the financial crime discipline and talk about what's involved with this, this program. So I think probably it's fair to say that there is a broader focus on the financial crime program than the anti-money laundering program, in that we're talking here about a range of financial crime, particularly focusing on fraud, bribery and corruption, and money laundering, cybercrime, insider dealing, and market abuse. Very, very topical. So we look at all of these financial crimes and how they interrelate. And we know, as I've mentioned already, that we're seeing a changing threat. So I've worked with organised crime groups, and I guess the organised crime groups I've worked with, I say worked with, that sounds bad. Let me rephrase that. Worked against organised crime groups, I guess ones you would define as traditional organised crime. You know, we've all seen the films, you know, the very hierarchical, where you have, you know, a Mr. Big or Mrs. Big potentially at the top of the organisation, but those people are typically insulated from the actual criminal activity, and there are very clearly defined rules, and if you cut off the head of the organisation, it will self-perpetuate. I mean, I've looked at motorcycle gangs, I've looked at Chinese triads. You know, these are what we think of when we think about traditional organised crime. But we know that increasingly organised crime is becoming cellular in nature, you know, loose groups that affiliate together. Maybe they share techniques and approaches, and we see this particularly when we talk about cybercrime. So we also know that there's a massive focus and a shift here from the regulator and from firms saying, let's think about protecting our customers, not just protecting ourselves. And you see this change right through the industry now. So you've all probably heard of boiler room frauds, advance fee frauds, you know, a lot of press recently about pension liberation frauds. You know, maybe there are frauds that are hitting consumers that don't necessarily hit the bottom line of a bank or a financial institution, but it can destroy people's lives. So the expectation now is that we don't just protect ourselves against direct financial losses, we also protect customers. So, for example, how do you deal with a vulnerable customer who is, you know, maybe elderly, who is being targeted by a fraudster? You know, so there's a very interesting changing emphasis we're seeing from regulators and in firms now. And we know, we've already seen, I think, put up that very powerful slide talking about the scale of regulatory fines. And of course, I think it's important to add, you know, some of these massive fines we've seen for bribery and corruption, money laundering, sanctions, general compliance violations. Actually, the cost of the fine itself is really the least of the problem. It's the cost of the remediation, the cost of putting it right. You know, we work extensively with a lot of the large firms that have been subject to very intrusive regulatory sanctions, you know, deferred prosecution agreements from the US, very intrusive, very wide-reaching remediation programs, which cost 4 or 5 times more than the actual penalty. And, you know, if you want to pick out an example, look at BNP Paribas, $8.9 billion penalties, but also blocked from certain activity involving US dollars. You know, losing key market share, losing key staff, changing the whole dynamic of that business. So we know now that there's an increasing response from firms to think about financial crime in a broader sense. And I see this, I'm sure you've all experienced this, historically a lot of firms have dealt with it in a very siloed fashion. So you have a fraud function, and you maybe have someone who's a specialist, you have an AML team, you have CDD people, and there isn't a connection. And that's extremely dangerous. I mean, whenever you've got fraud, successful fraud, you have by definition got money laundering. And a lot of the disciplines are the same, aren't they? Doing a risk assessment to understand where are you at risk from an external fraud attack or an internal fraudster. You know, the disciplines are very similar. So this course is designed to, I guess, educate about the emerging threats and to talk about how best practice to combat these threats. So many of you will be familiar with the NCA. One of the benefits we have on the program is that we are a broad church, and we get lots of law enforcement people, lots of regulators, and that's fascinating. you know, for both them and for those of us who are maybe from the regulated sector to hear, you know, the dynamic from both sides. Very interesting. And this is just an extract here from the recent National Crime Agency threat assessment for the UK. Look at this. Organised criminals identified as operating in the UK on a serious organised crime basis, 36,000 of these organised criminals. And organised crime groups. Now, there is a definition of this that are, you know, have a footprint, have an interaction with the UK. You know, nearly 6,000 organised crime groups. And that's frightening. You know, the scale of this is huge. And, you know, we're all at risk from this as a society and as individual organisations. No one really knows the true cost of organised crime, criminal activity, but there have been estimates. You know, we know the impact is massive, both in terms of actual harm to society. You know, we talk about lost revenue to the exchequer, you know, but the scale is huge. What is the main facilitator for serious and organised crime? Technology. Of course it is. We're seeing, you know, I mean, I don't consider myself a Luddite, but, you know, my 9-year-old daughter can now do stuff on her iPad, which frightens me. So, you know, it's keeping up with this is a challenge for financial crime practitioners. On this program, we're not going to give you the minutiae about, you know, designing firewalls or, you know, the actual intricacies of Bitcoin. What we are going to equip you with is enough knowledge to ask the right questions of your operational people, of your business. For example, you know, you're launching a new client onboarding platform in your business. What questions should you ask around the controls? You know, you're testing dummy data. Is that dummy data actually live customer data? Should it be? Who are the vendors and external contractors who are coming into your organisation to access this data? Are they able to frolic barefoot through fields of customer data? Or do you actually restrict that? And how do you restrict that? So, you know, this is a very interesting area, very fast moving, and we do look at cutting edge practices around financial crime and new technology. Again, fraud in financial services, the course is very interesting because it looks at business frauds. So these are frauds that could affect any commercial operation. So I don't know if you've heard terms like teaming and lading, you know, long-firm frauds. These sort of, you know, some frauds that have been with us for years, you know, years and years. But, you know, people are still falling prey to these. So we'll also, though, focus on specific frauds targeted at the banking sector and life insurance companies, wealth management companies, the gaming industry. You know, we're looking at these different types of frauds that target the regulated sector. So we look at mortgage fraud, credit fraud, banking fraud, credit card fraud. I mentioned we train PayPal. Very interesting to hear how some of these new payment system providers get targeted by fraud and financial crime. And we look at not only do we look at the typologies and I've heard the term, I love a bit of buzzword in a presentation like this, but the threat vectors is a term I've heard used a lot. You know, in other words, how are we being targeted? But we don't just look at that, we look at what makes good systems and controls to stop it. So, you know, it is really interesting when you get people thinking about it. And one of the most enjoyable things I think on the course is we pull apart actual fraud attacks against financial institutions. And we look at what went wrong and we think about what we can take away from that. And you compare it to your own firm, and often that's very powerful. You know, I train in a range of organisations, and some organisations I can walk in the door, I might get a little name tag, and then I'm basically left to my own devices to wander around all day. Other organisations, it's like Fort Knox. You know, you literally is paperless. There are bits of paper, but you have to sign for them. Every desk has a camera on it. You know, customer data is locked down, you know, so tight. But there are massive inconsistencies in the industry. And we'll talk about some of these best practice controls. So I've mentioned we do look at what regulators are saying now around systems and controls, bribery and corruption being a key one. I think bribery and corruption is a fascinating one because there was a massive brouhaha, wasn't there? That's, again, another technical term, around the Bribery Act when it came out. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of organisations have now entered a complacency zone about the Bribery Act. But we are now seeing bigger and bigger cases going through the courts. The SFO, you know, are taking action now, aren't they? We're seeing, of course, the US continue to look for high-profile targets around bribery and corruption. And we know that the regulator here is looking very closely at our systems of controls around bribery and corruption, money laundering and sanctions. And I've mentioned this already, not just protecting ourselves, but looking after our customers. I work a lot with life companies and pension companies. Pension liberations is a very interesting one. And there is a real tension at the moment between the industry saying we are doing everything we can to stop people falling victim to frauds, but the government and the regulators also have a role to with education. And there is a tension at the moment out there. And again, I think the cybercrime, the law enforcement agencies are all recruiting more specialists in this area. They're trying to refocus their teams, like not just the National Crime Agency, but all the lead force. The City of London being the lead force around fraud, is refocusing its skill set. And again, we will explore cybercrime in some detail. So another really fascinating area of the course is looking at the insider threat. We look at real cases of internal fraud. We look at actually some very interesting research into behavioural psychology from a criminal psychologist who's been into prisons and interviewed convicted fraudsters. And he's asked them, not just how did you commit your fraud, but what motivated you to actually take that step. And what's interesting from his research is that the number one thing that pushes people over into committing internal fraud is a perceived grudge against their employer. Now, often this is self-justification because obviously greed is always going to be at the core of it, usually. But often it's someone who feels that they've been passed over for the promotion, didn't get the pay rise they were entitled to, or that their employer themselves is corrupt. And also, we look at the failings of picking up these behavioural flags and indicators. Very interesting area. And the controls, joiners and leavers. So again, in my experience of industry, when I talk to practitioners, there is often a real tension between a financial crime compliance function and an HR function. Because HR tend to be focused exclusively on employment law, but actually we know that a lot of fraud gets perpetuated because of HR-related failings. And that's both when you onboard someone to your organisation, but also when people leave, not switching off the controls. Now, I work for a large financial services firm. I won't say which one. I went back to train them about a year and a half after I'd left, and they said to me, Becca, you do realise that until last week you were still authorised to sign off cheques up to £1 million. And I said, I wish you'd told me this. I would have been on a beach somewhere rather than training you lot. So it still happens in even big financial institutions. You're probably aware, a lot of you here will have seen these enforced holiday periods that have now become the norm in many firms. Sadly, that's not for your mental health, is it? That's to try and stop a lot of the frauds that require you to be physically in an office. So we'll look at that side of it. Our old friend here, separation of duties. If you read any fraud textbook, you'll see that term. And it's amazing, though, the number of times people in a firm haven't done fundamental sort of assessments and said, all right, where can we put in natural fire breaks so no one person can do too much? And that sort of discipline, that way of thinking is what we explore on the course. But of course, across, I think fair to say, all the ICA programs, culture underpins everything, doesn't it? Now, when it comes to bribery and corruption, when it comes to fraud, when it comes to money laundering, you can have procedures and policies, but unless you look people in the eye and they really believe it's a serious or real issue, you will not get anywhere. And we're not promising to give you a magic bullet to change the culture in your organisation overnight, but what we do is look at some real strategies for trying to embed the right cultures and behaviours. And we also look at what regulators are actually now looking for when they come in and try and gauge your culture. And it really is important, that it underpins everything, doesn't it? Bribery and corruption, I think I've mentioned this already. We've seen a massive spike in activity in the last 10 years. And I think probably what I would say is fascinating for me about bribery is, again, when you start running real cases, real scenarios through, anti-bribery and corruption controls are all about doing risk assessments and saying, where are we most likely in our business to see a violation of bribery laws? And you look at the actual figures, it's very striking. Your biggest risk is your third-party relationships. And the law, of course, in the US and the UK is very clear. If you have an agent or a third party who's out negotiating deals on your behalf, that person pays a bribe on your behalf, you are guilty. So, and of course, most of you will know about the defence under UK law for having adequate procedures. And what do those adequate procedures actually look like? We're running through some of those scenarios. We talk a lot about the rise in enforcement under the US FCPA, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and we look at the differences between the various extraterritorial laws and bribery that impact. I think, you know, gifts and hospitality is always held up as, I think people naturally think, well, we must sort out our gifts and hospitality policy, and that's important, but I think the biggest risk for most organisations is managing their third-party relationships properly and doing due diligence on those third parties on an ongoing basis. So, you know, it's a very interesting part of the course. I think one of the bits of the course I most enjoy here is looking at not just the actual systems and controls, but the actual latest view on how do corrupt politicians, for example, move value out of developing economies, and how do we fight that? You know, I mentioned trade this morning. I know Viri and Andrew here, two members of the team, have done a lot of work exploring the risks around this in developing countries and how do we fight this. You know, it's a very interesting area. You know, best practice in systems and controls. You know, Dawn here has worked giving advice to firms in consultancy role and in industry, looking at, you know, how do we actually people in more vulnerable roles to consider, you know, what can I say to a third party or an agent? What can I say to a customer? And a lot of it is about education. How do you educate people in firms? So, yeah, very interesting area. I mean, a good example, this case, I'm not sure if you're au fait with it, the Morgan Stanley case. It's always held up as a triumph of good compliance, but actually I think the case is a bit more nuanced than that. So I know the chap that was general counsel for Morgan Stanley, or head of bribery in this case, erupted. He now works for a large oil and gas company. And he, basically, for those of you who don't know about this case, an employee of Morgan Stanley in Hong Kong became involved in corrupt business dealings with a Chinese official involving property purchases and was involved in the payment of huge bribes. Now, initially, Morgan Stanley and the individual were charged, but Morgan Stanley were able to evidence that they had trained this guy, this employee, I think it was 7 or 8 times face-to-face, and had given him something like 35 separate communications about bribery and corruption. They had very robust policies. They monitored third-party relationships. They were able to prove all of this, and the regulators accepted that this employee was just a bad apple, and there's only so much you can do. You can't stop bad people all the time. That's why it's always held up, because he went to prison, but the firm did not get a penalty. However, it took them years to get to that settlement, and they spent millions in legal fees. So while it was a victory, it was a little bit of a Pyrrhic victory. But still, a really interesting case. And we do look at a lot of actual cases where bribery has manifested. Does anyone know what this is? No? This was actually, I think that was Swiss Cottage, the Swiss Cottage branch of the banks that were targeted in London a year or so ago. It's a virtual keyboard, which again, this is where actually, I've heard, an interesting term I've heard the other day was wetware. And one of our experts was talking to us about this, and he said, your biggest risk is your wetware. And there were blank faces around the room. Does anyone know what wetware is? We know about hardware and software. Your speakers? No. Wetware. Any idea? It's human beings. That's your biggest risk. And actually, it's striking, isn't it? In a lot of cybercrimes, you know, we think, oh my God, it's all about sophisticated controls. Here, guy put on a BT type engineer shirt, high-vis jacket, sauntered into a branch of a UK retail bank and said, I'm here to fix something on the computers. And of course, people, yeah, whatever, come on in. He's merrily fitting one of these to a system, and they're capturing keystrokes, controlling keyboard access to, say, a BACS terminal, whatever it was, and they very nearly got away with it. So quite often, you know, a lot of big data security breaches, IT related, it comes down to the human factor, doesn't it? And you see this across a range of organisations, and you know, many organisations have fallen victim to this, where, you know, people just, you know, they target human frailty, human trust, and they use bravado, social engineering techniques, which some of you, I'm sure, have heard of that term. You know, influencing people, using very, very common human frailties. So we look a lot about data security, very interesting area. I have a friend who every Friday, her job is to go out and stand in the car park outside her office and watch the third-party shredding company destroy the documents to make damn sure that they are actually destroying them, not just taking them away and chucking them in a skip somewhere. So, there's a lot of interesting practice here. How do you control third parties? How do you manage the risk of data security? And a lot of it is linked to human beings, making sure your staff know what the dangers are. So, in terms of the actual course itself, I think let me just list some of the areas that we cover. I think it's fair to say that it touches on AML, but at a much higher level than the AML diploma. So again, if you're debating, well, should I go for the AML program or the financial crime program, I'm happy to chat with you. They're both excellent qualifications. I think the AML one is, obviously, as the name implies, much more focused on those that want to specialise in that sector, and that in itself has become a huge industry in its own right in terms of varied and specialist roles. This qualification is for people who maybe want to focus more broadly. So fraud is a big aspect, bribery and corruption, but also AML, but at a sort of a wider level. And again, if you're umming and ahhing which one's right for you, happy to talk to myself, or particularly I would say Dawn or Andy here, and indeed Viri as well. Would be happy to chat to you about that as well. So, but here's the sort of range of subjects that we tend to focus on. I think we've mentioned most of these already. So we probably haven't touched too much on is market fraud, very interesting area, insider dealing, market abuse, and again, in my experience, quite often when people come to the program, these are subjects they're not that au fait with, and I think there is a worrying gap in knowledge of a lot of compliance officers in this area. Most of you here will work for listed entities, or if you don't work for listed entities, you'll have clients that are listed. So inside information, there is key risks there that need to be managed. Market abuse is a wider concept, which covers things like market manipulation, false and misleading information, but also abuse of inside information as well, from a civil perspective. We also talk about investigating fraud and financial crime. So again, the biggest internal frauds I've dealt with have involved collusion. I've had cases where 3 middle managers working together in a procurement function to actually circumvent controls. If you get a massive internal incident like that, there are many, many things you need to consider when you're doing an investigation. It could be a big organised fraud ring attacking your firm. So there are lots of do's and don'ts, everything from interviewing suspects, gathering evidence. When do you tell your regulator? If you get an allegation made about an internal fraud, do you pick up the phone to the regulator there and then and say, we've got a problem, it looks bad. At the moment, I don't know if it's true or not, but it looks horrific. I'm off to have a large gin and tonic. Goodbye. That's probably not the appropriate thing to do, is it? What's probably better is to do an evaluation, have a detailed fraud response plan, but early on, if you believe there is substance to the allegations, do a notification to your regulator. Don't leave it too late. We know about the expectations of regulators and the fact that we must be open and honest. So there is an approach that needs to be taken there. And of course, we explore as well gathering evidence, interviewing suspects and witnesses, and dealing with law enforcement. Some very interesting aspects of the course there as well. So again, in terms of the program, we get a lot of great feedback about this. I think it's one of the most challenging ICA programs to do because it does cover a wide-ranging syllabus. But I think it helps you get an idea of how all these risks interrelate, and how some of the disciplines to manage these risks also have a lot in common. Everything from doing a risk assessment to implementing, for example, a 3 lines of defence type model in an organisation. These disciplines cut right across all sort of financial crime risk. And again, we get great feedback from the programs as well. Oh goodness, right, okay. And there we have Dawn and Andy up there as well, who are about today. So I think in terms of that's probably all I want to say at this stage. I was going to hand over now to Tariq, who I've not really had a chance to say too much to Tariq, but I think I'm just really grateful for you coming along, just to say a little bit about your experience, Tariq. So I'll let you introduce yourself to the guys. Thank you, and then we'll have a quick Q&A at the end. Thank you.
Hi guys. Hello. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tariq Aslam, and I work with Stephen for Ernst & Young within the financial crime practice. I would like to thank the ICA on behalf of Ernst & Young for inviting me to speak today. And I'm essentially here to share my experience and my perspective on the ICA diploma and to answer 3 key questions. Why did I decide to enroll on the course? How am I finding the course? And what are the benefits? So why did I decide to enroll onto the course? When moving jobs, especially at my level, I found that employers had a tendency to look at 2 main things: qualifications and experience. I'm currently studying for the diploma, having transitioned from a Big 4 tax practice into financial crime consulting. So when I joined Ernst & Young, I didn't have a huge degree of consulting experience. So that is the main reason why I decided to roll onto the course, to accelerate my technical knowledge. It also helped that Ernst & Young have a strong relationship with the ICA. And so the majority of my colleagues had already completed the diploma, allowing me to gain an in-depth understanding of what the course entailed. Now, like I said, I came from a tax background. And whilst having a tax accounting qualification proves a degree of competency, it didn't provide me with the core technical knowledge required for financial crime consulting. Historically, the CIMA qualification was the benchmark for consultants to get ahead in the market. However, when I was interviewing for financial crime roles prior to joining Ernst & Young, I found that the ICA was a differentiator and a qualification to make me stand out in the market. Now to my second question: how am I finding the course? So I'm currently studying for the diploma in financial crime, and the course comprises of 2 assignments and 1 exam in November. I completed my first assignment in June, my second one last week, and there is an open book exam in November. In terms of balancing studying and working together, it all depends on working style. Personally, I'm quite meticulous and organized, and this allowed me to manage my time quite well. Again, the support I received from my colleagues at Ernst & Young helped massively. And I think it's quite simple and applies to most facets of life. Effort and time correlates to success. What you put in is what you get out. Benefits. I found that the diploma has definitely had a positive impact on my personal credibility. And working for Ernst & Young, I am privileged to be part of an organization which pitches for all different types of engagements across the world. And having the diploma on my CV allows me to be included in more proposals, thus increasing my exposure to the market. Technically, it provides a fantastic foundation to build upon, and I have found that it has helped significantly with the work that I do on a daily basis. The course is also a fantastic networking medium, providing the opportunity to meet a vast array of people from different backgrounds. I'd like to end this talk with one final point, and it's with a discussion I had last week with a senior partner. And what he said really resonated with me, and he expressed the importance of building your own brand. You as an individual are your own brand and are fortunate enough to have the resources and opportunities around you to build on it. As your career progresses, you should always seek to evolve and develop yourself as a brand. And the ICA diploma helps you do so and helps you refine your brand, and is something you should seriously consider to make your brand be the best it can be. Thank you very much for listening, and both my Stephen will be available at the end of this talk to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, mate. That's great. Thank you. Again, that's really useful. I think I've still on mic here. So thank you, Tariq, and again, Stephen. Before I know, we've got another EY person who's going to talk as well. I think no. Anyway, but very useful. So the guys I know will be happy to answer questions for you as well. So just any Q&A at all about the financial crime program. Happy to take any questions from the floor on that. No? Oh, we do have one behind you there, Joe.
Hello. My question is basically regarding with the diploma.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've sort of in between AML and financial crime, as you say. But are the skills that you get on the financial crime transferable into jobs that would normally be from the AML diploma? Could you go into either field?
Yeah, definitely. So AML is a core part of the syllabus on the financial crime program. So, you know, the financial crime discipline, we get a lot of people who've done the financial crime program who've ended up in more AML-focused jobs. And I think it possibly gives you a broader perspective. So, I mean, obviously the advantage of the AML diploma is if you are actively seeking primarily AML-focused roles, it does go into more depth, particularly around things like CDD, sanctions issues. But the answer is doing the FCP diploma can definitely open doors on the AML front as well. And we do see that, people who are cross, and we get it the other way as well. We get people who do AML who end up in a broader financial crime type role. So a lot of people actually do both. In fact, we've had quite a few people do all three, haven't we, over the years? So yeah, well, quite often we do find that people do one, they go and do the other, because they are designed to be complementary. Okay.
Hello, my name is Dean Armand. Just an observation, not a question. With regard to wetware, when I was at university, I used to have a job working for Rent-A-Kill.
Oh, yeah.
And you will be absolutely amazed at the number of times we were allowed into various...
Just because you had an overall on with Rent-A-Kill on it.
Rent-A-Kill on, and you would be allowed
Amazing,
into areas.
isn't it?
You could close them down because you said you were using chemicals and people weren't allowed to be there.
I think it's something about
So
people
it's worth
respect
bearing in
authority,
mind.
don't they? They see someone in a uniform or with an idea, and their minds go blank, don't they? So yeah, thank you. Very interesting. Okay, thank you everyone. I'll hand back to Bill if I can. The clicker.
Okay, very quickly then, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to just move on to the final area. We have a number of postgraduate diplomas for very senior people. And what we mean by that is normally people who've been working for at least 10 years of experience. Or people who've done the diploma and have had 3 years of experience can often progress through. Now, there are two specific areas here to look at. One is the professional postgraduate diploma in governance, risk and compliance. That's been running for about 3 years now, and this year, for the first time, we'll be doing the first professional postgraduate diploma in financial crime compliance. Now, the important things about this is the elite qualification of the ICA. This is what is called a level 7 qualification. It means that it's postgraduate level and can form part of a master's program. So, for example, if you take one of these programs here, you can go to a number of universities and get what is called a APL, Approved Prior Learning, and you can top up that diploma that you've done here into an MSc or a master's program. So the thing about these, though, is that it's designed for senior people. It's very user-friendly in the sense, of course, it takes a year. What we do here is we give access to all the other manuals on the program, on all of the various diplomas that you've been hearing about earlier. So you've got access to all of those as part of the platform. In addition to that, though, the way this one's taught is that it's 2 long weekends at the University of Oxford. So you come in Friday afternoon and you'll do 1 Friday evening, 2 on Saturday, and 1 on Sunday. And then you do that 2 of those long weekends at 6 months apart. In between time, there's a lot of, in fact, integration work, a lot of doing your own study. There's pieces of work that have got to be handed in. But it seems to suit people who are in very senior management positions who don't have a huge amount of time in order to progress their career. The most telling statistic on this about how important this program is, and I was absolutely staggered about this, we must have put, I think something like 200 people have been on the first 3 or 4 intakes of this course. More than 50% of people who've been on this course have changed their job in that year while they were on this course. 50%, and every single one of them upwards. I think that gives you an indication. Terrific networking opportunity. People are coming in from all over the world, different types of organisation. But I think that is an absolutely staggering statistic in terms of what a program of like this can do. Not just the program itself, but it then enhances what you're doing and the range of opportunities that it opens up for you. So comprehensive materials, as I say, all the manuals are online. You get terrific amount of help. There's a great camaraderie on this program. I think there's no question about that. I'm not going to go through these because the reality is those are the 10 masterclass topics. Each of those 10 topic areas has a 3-hour masterclass. 2 of them are online. The first one, standards research and assessment, and the assessment presentation. So the top and bottom we do online by way of preparation. And then the other 8 are the 8 3-hour masterclasses. As Jonathan adverted to earlier, they're delivered by leading specialists from around the world. They come in and deliver the 3-hour session. Now, the other unique aspect of this, I'll just go through those in a second, is how you study this. Obviously, you're given access to the online learning platform, and you've got your residential weekends, but what you have to do is you take those master classes, and you have to write up 6 of them. Now, what that means is you've got 1,000 words to actually say, what were the key principles from the master class, and how might you use them within your organisation? So they're very practically focused. These are not long assignments like you do on the diploma. They're 1,000-word summaries. So 6 of those are then added together, and you do those as the program goes on. And then at the end of the day, there is a formal, I'll come back to that in a second, how you then are assessed on this particular program, which is unique, is a 3-hour oral interview. So you then go in with 1 or 2 people who are specialists in the area. They will talk to you. The first hour is normally talking about you and your CV and things you've done. Because this program carries with it 8 TM credits. And what that means is that's broadly half of a master's degree. And what the University of Manchester have done here, they say it's worth 80 credits, and therefore it's what is called APL, Approved Prior Learning. And what we're doing is we're assessing you as individuals. We're looking at all of your background, all the things that you can do. So the first hour of the interview, we're saying to you, tell us what you do. You know, have you ever done this? Demonstrate to us your leadership skills. Give us any case studies that you've dealt with within your job role. So we're talking to you about yourself, and then after that, the extra 2 hours, we map you across against something called the National Occupational Standards of Competency in either compliance, AML, financial crime, one of those broad areas. And then we talk to you about the technical skills in those areas. But you will know those because you'll have chosen them in advance. You choose 10 specialist areas, and then we talk to you about them. So it's a very unusual way of assessing people, but it's the best way of all, because I will know so much more about somebody after 3 hours in an oral interview than if you'd done me 10 3-hour written papers. It's a fantastic way of assessing people's capabilities, and it works extremely well. And people really enjoy it. People love talking about themselves. So you sit there for 3 hours and you listen to them, and it's a really good way of assessing how people are, whether they're competent or not. This is a competent, not competent. You're not graded at all on this. You're either competent or you're not yet competent in all of these areas. But that's what universities do at the highest level. If you do a doctorate, of course, you'll do your thesis and submit it, but you then have an oral interview, a viva voce, is the way that it's assessed. And that's the best way. And if you're a senior practitioner who's been working in a job, how better than to be assessed about what you know than in the context of what you're doing within your own environment. So it's a really novel and interesting and exciting way of testing people. Okay, so the people who apply, usually senior to middle level, been working at least 10 years, or people who've done the diploma and have had 3 years experience. So just working back there, why would you want to do it? As I say, first of all, it's part of the educational infrastructure. The reality there that you've done a professional postgraduate diploma, level 7 qualification, can lead into a master's degree if you want it. The thing is, I think the key indicator for me is the opportunities. It's a recognition of the level of your standing. It's a real demonstrator to the regulator. And 1 or 2 of the guys earlier on have been talking about here in the UK, you know, this senior persons regime. You are now going to have to demonstrate to the regulators that you're competent in your job role. So if you're a compliance officer, an MLRO, a director of the company, you're going to have to demonstrate competence. How are you going to do that? Now, one of the best ways is through qualifications as well as experience. And so that's a critical component in all of this about why you would want to do it. It's a clear demonstration of competence at the highest level, and that's what the regulators want to see going forward. As well as that, it gives you an additional title. So as well as getting the professional postgraduate diploma, you will become a fellow automatically of the ICA, which is FICA, and you can use the term certified professional there, as we've indicated. So lots of reasons why you would want to do it. Now, as I say, those of you that we have a number of people now who've done that program and have gone on to various postgraduate diplomas, postgraduate qualifications such as the MSc. Classic one there, University of Law. You can do 3 online modules to top up your professional postgraduate diploma to an MSc. And I think that's one way. Or you can go and do a pure research degree. Most master's degrees that are in this area will give you advanced standing based upon having done a professional postgraduate diploma. So I don't want to spend too much time because I know many of you are in different areas and different levels. Okay, what I'm going to do now then is, sorry, Becca, yeah?
Could I just mention, Bill, just very briefly, if I may, it's probably just with, I think I haven't got my mic on, sorry. Just also want to briefly mention, just to add to that, that in January, we'll be launching the new specific postgraduate diploma in financial crime compliance as well, which is, a more financial crime focused program. As Jonathan, I'm sure, will be able to talk to you about, the governance, risk and compliance diploma, a postgraduate diploma, has been running to extremely great feedback over the last couple of years, and we believe that now the time is right to also have effectively a financial crime version of the program as well. So again, I think there's a slide up there, thank you, Bill, with all that material. So I just thought I'd mention that specifically as well, and there's obviously information on the ICA website about all of that too. Thanks, Bill.
Jonathan, do you want any comments you'd like to make about it?
Yeah, this isn't on. Just very briefly as well on the postgrad, two things. One, they are residential in Oxford. It's a wonderful weekend where you enjoy yourselves, the educational environment as well, and the networking opportunities are fantastic. We restrict the weekends to 25 delegates. We had to put on an extra weekend in Oxford at short notice last year because it's proving so popular. And they really are a wonderful opportunity to sort of talk about the challenges facing the industry at a senior level. But just to add to that, I know a lot of you here are thinking, well, maybe in 5 years' time, that's the qualification for me. Also bear this in mind when you go back and you talk to your senior managers who might think, well, I haven't got time to do a qualification. I haven't got time to do this. I'm too busy running the business. Maybe you want to point them in the direction of the postgrad. Yes, they might have to give up a couple of weekends and a little bit of work around preparing for the assessment interview, but actually it might well help you in your roles an awful lot if you can persuade some of your directors to do the postgrad to get that real understanding of regulatory risk across governance, risk and compliance, and then next year in financial crime as well. Okay.
Okay, so just before we finish, are there any generic questions, on anything that you've heard, not just on this, on any of the areas that you'd like to discuss? We're then going to break, as I say, and then all the individual people will be there, the academics, the ICA people, and they'll answer any other queries, or we'll take individual questions. But if you've got a question that might be applicable for many people here, has anybody got anything at this point? Yeah?
I think you just mentioned that there are 25 people involved in this. In the regular diploma, about how many people are in the class?
Same. We normally put a cap on it around about 25. We don't allow big groups, if that's right, because they are workshops. They're essentially, you've got to have that sort of size in order to get interaction.
Will any of these courses cover the Bitcoin or the cryptocurrency or the regulations around that?
That would be within...
The answer is yes, both the AML diploma. Sorry, I've lost the questioner there, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So, yeah, the answer is very much so. And in fact, a gentleman here, I know Andy Clark here, who's done a lot of work in this area, and my colleague Lee Byrne as well, very expert on this subject. The hot and cold wallets of Bitcoin and the risks of and the challenges of regulating something where there isn't a central bank behind it. And of course, it's not just Bitcoin. There are a range of other rapidly emerging virtual currencies and new internet payment methods. So absolutely core to the AML and FCP, we do look at the emerging technologies, obviously including Bitcoin. And there's a lot of fascinating dilemmas, I guess, for regulators and firms as it increasingly becomes mainstream. It is a very, very interesting area.
Okay, that seems to be it. Well, can I thank you so much for listening to us, for been quite a long session, but hopefully you've had a wide range of people here. They'll all be staying around to talk to you if that's what you'd like to do. And if you are interested in taking any of the courses, then just go on to and the application form's there. But you've got most of the information that you need here now. So thank you very much indeed.
Everyone who has a chance should attend because there's something for everyone. There's people for auditing, for ethics, for compliance, for governance, for everything. So if you want to be really a leading edge professional, this is the place to be.